Come on, one take, let's go. In 2022, character design discourse in the Genshin community was happening, and on one thread about it, someone brought Arknights into it, because the AK community is nosy as fuck. Someone else then made probably one of the most important tweets of all time.
Oh, so they can make interesting and good diverse character designs, they just choose to leave it to the enemies. Stop playing this damn game, definitely stop giving it your money.
The fan services were so obvious back in Inazuma updates to BH. I literally lost all hope after they revealed how pathetic Ito 3D model is when it's just a matter of copy-pasting from the Ronin NPCs.
The fan service. Bro, is a gacha game and you expect they don't have fan service? LMAO.
My point is, you can create a unique character while also satisfy what the players need. Arknight is a good example in my opinion. Genshin's design on the other hand just feels so lifeless to me.
Her design looks like shit. Just a bunch of random design choices thrown together. Meanwhile, Ayato derives design inspiration for the actual Meiji era of feudal Japan. But sure, lifeless. Like the AK character design is just blatant hypersexualization for the sake of pandering to horny teenagers. Meanwhile, Ayato has actual thought and inspiration put into it. You really thought this was a good comparison, huh?
That was awesome.
That was so good. That was so good.
Damn, if I ever make a video like this, I know who to go to.
Right?
It's
like, hey,
I
Ram,
almost
you
want to
wanna,
punch
you
you
wanna...
right now, dude.
Right? You hear that shit?
Everyone dunked on it, shared art of the game, and had a good laugh. I mean, Arknights being hypersexualized? Really? It was pretty easy to tell that the other person was being unreasonable, so it's just kind of funny. Oh, were they? Hello, Foresty friends. I've been wondering, how sexualized are Arknights' character designs, really? And how does Arknights even go about sexualizing their characters? As you all may know, I'm an artist and I have an interest in character design. It's an interesting topic to talk and learn about for me. I've always thought about stealing TV Skyne's shorts format of reviewing character designs before I realized how much work it would take. I have a full-time job now. Okay, I can't make videos monthly anymore. The Natsume Yujincho video is coming though, trust. Another topic that has been on my mind recently has been sexualization in character design. For no particular reason, I've been exploring the topic more and more as I become an adult since I wasn't as open about it when I was a teen. For good reason. This got me thinking though. Arknights is often cited as a gacha game that doesn't overly sexualizes its characters, and I decided that, with the limited amount of character design knowledge I have, to actually explore how true that is. I also want to talk about Arknights' approach to sexualizing their characters because I find it to be genuinely interesting. This is a mature academic study, okay? Be normal adults and have both hands on the desk, please. Now, before I start, I want to make a few definitions clear because some people do struggle with discerning what sexualization is and how it looks in character design. I really recommend Viverosa's video, How to Actually Sexualize a Male Character, partly because it's a good video and partly because I think it covers a lot of the things that people tend to struggle with when it comes to this concept. I cannot emphasize this enough. Sexualizing a character is an action and not an adjective. It does not matter whether or not you personally find a character hot or not. What matters is how the character is framed and whether we can tell that the emphasis of a character is something sexual in some way. That can range from just general attraction to using something related to king culture, as in their designs. An artwork with a woman with large breasts isn't automatically sexualized. A woman with large breasts in an artwork that focuses on those breasts with framing and certain details is. To really make it clear what is and isn't sexualization, we actually have a pretty good example to look at. Ayato and Golden Glow. Looking at these two gives us a good chance to establish what sexualization looks like, or more specifically, what it doesn't look like. See, the original post of the reply says, well, a lot of things that I disagree with when you unpack it, but there is this hypersexualization comment. To be hypersexualized would mean that Golden Glow's sex appeal is being significantly more centered than Ayato's. For her sex appeal to be centered, there would be a couple of things artists could do. There's no one answer to this because art in and of itself is a subject that rarely has binary objective answers. There's not really a formula to this sort of thing. We only have our cultural context and societal understanding of sex to work from. This is the reason why interacting and observing the real world and getting in touch with all its nuances is how you can get better at drawing, by the way, aside from drawing a lot. However, being a female character, maybe an area of her body like her chest or crotch could be more emphasized by her clothes, or she could have a character quirk that is made to appeal to people's fetishes or kinks. On Golden Glow, she has more thighs showing than Ayato, who is completely covered. So, case closed, right? Golden Glow is more sexualized than Ayato. Well, not really. In the real world, people wear clothes that are showing skin all the time in ways that aren't always sexual, especially within the context of fashion. Crop tops are an example of this. They can be sexy in certain contexts and poses, but they can also just be a plain old fashionable item in others. In Golden Glow's case, her introduction is that she's a really passionate hairdresser, so one can imagine that she is familiar with fashion. Her short skirt and thigh socks don't necessarily read as a deliberate attempt to sexualize her, but as an indication that she's into trendy, cute clothes. We can also tell that this isn't meant to sexualize her by the way her art is just framed. Aside from her garter and the socks, which also communicate her practical nature alongside her fashion sense, there's no attempt to highlight the thighs in any way. No strong highlights, no sitting pose that has the camera shoved into her thighs. There's barely even any squish to the thighs to show how soft they are. In her E2, the emphasis is meant to be on her scared face with the electric energy swirling around her and the bright light behind her head. You'd sooner notice how sad she looks over how plump her thighs are. Golden Glow is clearly made to look appealing and cute, not sexy, especially not hypersexualized to attract horny teenagers. And this is going to be a tangent. OP wasn't the one that brought up Ayato and Golden Glow, but comparing the two was going to be unfair from the jump. Not because Golden Glow was, a bunch of random design choices thrown together, but rather being that Ayato is a male character, and male characters are simply not made the same way females are in gacha games. Ayato is meant to exude elegance and grace. He isn't being sexualized either. Male characters in these unisex gacha games are very rarely allowed to have their fanservice moments because a lot of businesses still believe men will pay more for sexy women, even though historically it has been shown time and time again that horny women are just as strong as a customer base, if not even stronger. Female characters are similarly believed to be required by the industry to be designed a certain appealing way. Maybe some bits of Golden Glow was meant to be ever so slightly more sexier than Ayato by virtue of them being different genders, but I guarantee that if we went band for band between Genshin and Arknights, Golden Glow will be on the same level as a majority of Genshin's female 2022 cast, or be less sexualized than them. And I say all of this to mention that the majority of Arknights' cast follows Golden Glow in the sexualization department. If sexual character designs were a spectrum between you can meet Jesus in this and you cannot be playing this in public, I'd say on average Arknights' designs are in the middle, and they occasionally skew to either the former or latter depending on the character. The only exception to this are some of the skins, but that's because skins are inherently for fanservice, which open up an interesting discussion of what characters get sexualized and how. Like Utage's, where her E1 is pretty innocuous enough, but then her swimsuit skin was where many people learned for the first time how endowed she is. Me being people. Whoa! Bazongas! It's actually a pretty good example of how, despite how sexualized large breasts are, she isn't necessarily being sexualized in her E1 and E2 with them. It's only when the art calls for it that the artist deliberately sexualizes her breasts by having her pose and camera be conveniently made to show as much cleavage as possible. And this isn't because the swimsuit is showing more skin. They could very much have had a ton of more obvious clothing wrinkles and highlights to define her breast in her E1, but they chose not to. But we're just talking about characters that aren't sexualized here. So what characters in Arknights are? I already mentioned Utage, but there's one more very prominently sexualized character in Arknights. Tomimi. Her E1 looks average, but then you get her E2 and oop, her entire ass is out sticking at ya. Her large tail really helps to guide your eyes to it, and her behind, while her torn stockings help to emphasize how big and plump her thighs are. The visible squish that changes depending on where the stockings are torn also helps. These are all very deliberate and obvious decisions from the artist to sexualize Tomimi and make her more attractive, which is done really well in my opinion. However, there's another aspect to Tomimi's sexualization that interests me, and it's the fact that her sexualization isn't just prominent in her art, but in the writing too. In her written content, there's a lot of mention of just how insecure, how thick her tail is, and there's a scene in the story where her tail gets spanked by her girl crush Gavial. In the context of the world too, there's an entire thing about the people from Tomimi's country debating on whether or not thin tails or thick tails are better. To me, this parallels the whole ass versus boobs topic in real life. This is very much obviously meant to emphasize to us that Tomimi has a thick ass and is taking direct reference to how thick asses are sexualized. This is interesting to me because I don't think any other female character gets sexualized in the writing like Tomimi. No one ever gets is having the characters have more flirty and affectionate voice lines with the doctor, the player, well, initially the player insert character. An example being Gaviel, who kisses you as her introduction voice line. She is very much leaning into that crazy flirty woman trope, but the game doesn't really do anything else with that. Hell, I don't think many of the women get fan service moments in other media like the manga or any of the animated series the game has. I haven't watched the anime though, I can't be sure. This is probably the reason why the female characters in Arknights feel significantly less sexualized, because there's no moment in the story that gets paused to center their sexuality to our faces. Even in stories where characters are in swimsuits for the majority of it, the story keeps moving and never stops to linger on it. An example of this would be in So Long Adele, where there's a scene of Bryophyta finding the female characters in a pool. There's a CG to show it off, yeah, but there's no scene of, like, Bryophyta acting as the male audience insert by blushing and staring at the hot babes in bikinis with a bloody nose and a detailed description like there probably would be in other stories that are trying to do that type of thing. It's surprisingly tasteful fan service that shows what needs to be shown and moves on swiftly. Tomimi's sexualization in this case makes her stand out even more as a character because her type of sexualization is not considered standard in Arknights. There are definitely characters that are as sexualized as her in art, like Whislash, but Tomimi is one of the few where she is sexualized in writing. Actually, speaking of Whislash, she's also another sexualized character who has flirty dialogue lines and is very much made to appeal to the older woman-loving crowd, but she is also an example of her sexualization, giving her more depth. For her design, she's an average Arknights design, but leans into being sexualized more than most. Hey, remember when I said that large breasts aren't necessarily sexual unless you try to emphasize them somehow? Well, a bright light shining on them could do that with armor that perfectly contours her waist and breasts. The short pencil skirt, stocking, and high heels are also reminiscent of the office siren aesthetic. That was a trend before the people doing it had to make follow-up TikToks about being sent to HR. She has a lot of fan servicey dialogue lines, and her E2 is her sticking her butt out while on her hands and knees. Whislash's backstory involves her being a renowned knight, which in the world of Arknights concurrently refers to a specific type of battle athlete, before getting injured, which made her have to step down to be an instructor instead. Some of her voice lines allude to her feeling a bit insecure about this, despite the fact that she has become used to her injury. In her Trust 1, she wonders where she herself went wrong with Maria, her niece, because Maria prefers to be the one making the weapons for competition rather than competing herself. In Trust 2, she expresses feeling empty because Margaret doesn't need her and Maria knows what she wants to do. It implies that she's struggling with feeling unneeded and being aimless. All of that works well with her story of being forced to retire from her career because of an injury, and her sexuality enhances it too. She's also different from the other women with whips by leaning into her attractiveness and being more flirty, which gives off the vibe that she's more inspired by the dominatrix archetype. The way she can be a little bit gleefully cruel in the manga also contributes to that. However, I feel that aside from being attracted to people that like a slightly older dominatrix woman, it also highlights how insecure she is about being seen as lesser than her nieces. Cause what else is quote-unquote lesser than a woman that aged out of her career? Whislash wants to be seen as somebody capable, so she also tries to hide these feelings by brushing them off with a, "I'm fine." Her leaning into her sexuality and femininity while having these feelings help emphasize this depth, because who would expect that the hot, attractive woman is struggling with feeling needed? So I've covered a character whose sexualization is used for the funnies and another whose sexualization is used to add some genuine character depth. So originally I had to add something to help transition to talking about the sexualization of male characters in Arknights in parentheses. I haven't come up with anything, so... I did mention before that male characters don't get sexualized as much as female characters, and it's the same case in Arknights. There's barely any sexualized male characters, but the ones we do have are pretty interesting to mention. But first, let me get one that a lot of fans are probably thinking of. A lot of people see Silver Ash as the game's king husbando because he was treated as de facto husbando by the game in the beginning. He has a lot of voice lines calling you his precious ally, while everyone talks about how cold and scary he is. It's very clear that he's appealing to a specific Moegap business rich husband thing. Unfortunately, it's not particularly interesting for me to talk about because I think he's pretty straightforward. Without knowing his story, he's the Bishi Wattpad CEO straight out of a YA novel fanservice character, and while that includes some sexual appeal, especially in his E2 where they try and go for this, when the businessman takes off his suit before sex moment thing in his E2, there's not much else to it. I feel like when his character was properly being explored, he's somewhat outgrown that trope, even though he still has that relationship with the Doctor. This is also probably a consequence of the Doctor becoming less of a self-insert and more of their own character by Arknights' narrative design. It is pretty interesting to showcase how Arknights' writing progressed from being somewhat filled with anime tropes as the Doctor being the self-insert before developing into a proper story. Now, the sexualized male character I do want to talk about is Midnight. Being a 3-star, he has a very simple design, but that doesn't mean there aren't any clever design choices in it. He's mostly covered with the exception of a button-up shirt that's very open. He's mostly in black with the exception of his shirt being a bright pink that really makes sure your eyes naturally fall onto that area first. His necklace also really helps to put more attention to it too. My favorite thing though is Midnight's skin. So the context of the skin is that it's meant to be a sort of advertisement for Rhodes Island by Closure, and the point is that it's over the top and a bit much. The conveniently torn up clothes, the bright blood on his chest, his gaze straight into the camera, and his pose is meant to sell the classic sex appeal that vampires are sold with as sexy, refined beasts that are capable of violence, but they hold back while staring at you with a trail of blood from the corner of their lips. Midnight looks like a porn actor version of himself. It's a perfect casting, really brilliant conceptually, and works both as sexy fan service for the people that are into it, and as a funny little skin that knows what it actually is. His sexuality also, again, gives him more depth because despite being the funny, flamboyant, sexy man trope, he's also genuinely kind and hardworking. Not in spite of his previous job as a host, but because of it. He genuinely enjoys his work, and despite many people trying to jokingly imply he got oropathy from sex, he got it because of a rival plotting against him. Also, hosts don't have sex with their customers, just so you know. It's also mentioned that Midnight sometimes keeps certain things like his exhaustion hidden, so this is another case of the writing using sexualization as a means of establishing some sort of dichotomy between how the character presents themselves and how they really are. There's one last character that I want to talk about, and it's the character that has basically inspired this entire video to begin with. Harold. Harold is an ex-military vet turned animal vet who very clearly appeals to the people that like silver fox men. His design isn't necessarily sexualized, but he is very dapper and elegant. My favorite thing about his design is that his fur trim, first of all, gives him more of a distinct silhouette and also tricks you into thinking he's a pompous noble by slightly covering his coat. That looks more like something you'd see in the 1900s British military to me. This dichotomy is more obvious in his E2 where he replaces his hat with a more military one, and he generally looks more like a war vet. He also has medals on his coat too, which is neat. He also has a prosthetic leg. Which makes sense, considering he has indeed participated in wars. It's notable to me because he is one of the only characters that have a prosthetic that is very clearly designed as one. It's honestly a surprise that there aren't more amputee characters considering the horrors of Terra. Even if you can chalk that up to gacha game needing characters that are always pretty in every way, it's a shame that we don't see more of it. I feel like there could be some interesting things you could do with that. Regardless, it's a good thing that Arknights is willing to include a respectable and lovable character like Harold with an amputated limb. I'm especially interested by the fact that he gets inviting snow in the Icefield Messenger skin line. So, I believe Harold is being sexualized here. Like, the skin is meant to be appealing to people sexually. His robe with an open collar, his garter sock when garters are essentially mask lingerie, the camera view being pointed upwards to show just a taste of his thigh up his robe. Yeah, this is meant to have some sexual energy even if he is wearing cute bird and beast slippers. He is meant to have some of that sexual appeal of a silver fox in a robe inviting you to sit next to him for some wine. And the thing that is interesting to me the most is that they don't attempt to hide his prosthetic limb despite this. Now, personally, I would have liked the skin more if he wasn't wearing it and just had his amputated limb out. It makes more sense to me than an amputee would try to have a relaxing day without wearing one, because have you seen what amputees have to wear for their prosthetic limbs? I get itchy thinking about it. But having Harold's prosthetic limb just there while he's being sexy is still pretty cool. I think a lot of people tend to shy away from portraying their disabled characters as sexy because they fear that it would be fetishistic or morally wrong to do so, but Harold's skin shows that you can still sexualize a disabled character to be appealing without it being disrespectful. This skin showcases Harold being happy, relaxed, and looking damn hot while doing so, and that makes me happy. Which then makes me think about the fact that Arknights does sexualize their characters at all. I mean, it's no brainer, right? Of course, a game that has the monetization system of gacha would go out of their way to make their characters appealing with sex. Yet fans and even some people outside of the community don't find the sexualization too obvious. I think part of it comes from the fact that Arknights sexualizes characters not with exaggeration, but by simply presenting the sexuality as is, with only a bit of framing work to emphasize it. There's no transparent wet clothes to perfectly drape over the body, no droplets of water to trail down skin, no blinding highlights to make the thighs glow, no pants that are so fucking tight you can see the curve of a woman's pussy. Just a bit of camera work and tears in the clothing is a treat. It works for Arknights specifically because Arknights has already established that this is how they want to present their characters. One of the first skin lineups in the game were swimsuit skins, and out of all of them, I'd only really say Skyfires and maybe Scotties are truly sexualized. The others either read as just cute, comfortable swim clothes, or in the case of Platinum Skin, are going more for an ethereal, beautiful vibe than a sexy one. This is how Arknights set the expectations of players right from the get-go, and it just works. I don't think it's right to say Arknights doesn't sexualize characters at all, but I also don't think the way they have been sexualizing characters has been bad. This is going a little bit unscripted, so forgive me. But I think also another part of it is the fact that like Arknights treats sexualization as like not necessarily like an obligation for the game, you know? They just treat it as like another thing in character designing that they can do. They're like exercising some restraint with the sexualization. That restraint really works, you know? If I had a bit more character design knowledge, I could probably say all of this a bit more eloquently, but for now, these are just my thoughts on the way Arknights sexualizes characters. I'm sorry that this is the first video in a long while, and it's not even the one people voted for. Whoops! Listen, having a full-time job sucks, but I'm also being paid with money I can use to buy Arknights stuff, okay? So it's a win, I'd say. I already have the script for the Stealing a Gacha Games lore video ready, so expect that next while I work on bigger projects. Like, subscribe, do all the things YouTubers ask you to do, yada yada yada. If you like the art I made, I have commissions open in a Ko-Fi where I post exclusive art on there, and you get a cute little chibi if you want it when you get memberships. And plus, your name gets to be read out at the end like this. Thank you to Kaiser and J8 for the memberships. I appreciate it. Stay safe, my foresty friends.